In the shadowed heart of a bustling old city, where the air smelled of spices and river mud, there lived a salt merchant named Henry Dawson. Every dawn, he pushed his creaking cart through narrow lanes, feeding his wife, Ellen, and their two sons with the white crystals that spilled like snow from his sacks. The younger boy, Archie, was sunlight made flesh, loud, fearless, quick to laugh. Customers loved him. Neighbors called him clever. But the elder son, Vincent, was missed. He spoke so softly that people leaned in and still missed his words. His eyes stayed fixed on the ground, as if the earth might open and swallow him if he looked up. Because he rarely answered back, the world decided he was slow-witted. Street vendors shortchanged him, children mocked him. Even his own father's voice grew sharp whenever Vincent hesitated. "Speak up, useless boy," Henry would thunder. "A man who cannot open his mouth will starve in this world." Each scolding was a hammer blow against the fragile glass of Vincent's confidence. By the time he reached manhood, the glass lay in shards. In examinations, his hand shook so violently that ink blotched the page like storm clouds. He failed again and again. When his father finally dragged him into the shop to help, disaster followed disaster. Wrong change given, customers offended, sacks miscounted. The father's anger grew into a permanent storm. One rain-soaked afternoon, while Henry was away settling debts, 3 strangers in fine coats entered the shop. Their smiles were too wide, their eyes too quick. "Your father sent us," the tallest one said smoothly. "There's a grand order for the mayor's house. He told us to take every sack immediately." Vincent's throat closed. A voice inside screamed, "Ask for proof." But the familiar terror rose like black water. His tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth. Hands trembling, he helped the men load sack after sack onto their wagon. By the time the last grain of salt disappeared down the lane, the shop stood empty. When Henry returned that evening and saw bare shelves, his roar shook the rafters. "You brainless fool! You've destroyed everything I bled for. Get out and never darken my door again." The word struck deeper than any slap. Vincent stumbled into the night, the city lights blurring through hot tears. Shame burned hotter than fever. At the riverbank, where the dark water slid past like a hungry serpent, he stopped. One step, he thought, and all this pain ends. He climbed onto the stone parapet. A rough hand suddenly seized his wrist and yanked him backward. Vincent fell hard onto the mud, gasping. An old wanderer with eyes like polished river stones stood over him, staff planted firmly in the earth. The locals simply called him Sage Elias. "Why?" Vincent cried, voice cracking. "Why stop me? My life is nothing but failure." Sage Elias studied him for a long moment, moonlight silvering his white beard. "Because, lad, the story is not finished. Come, spend 3 days with me. If, at the end, you still wish to jump, I myself will push you in." Something in the old man's calm voice pierced the darkness. Vincent followed. Sage Elias lived in a tiny cottage beyond the city walls. That first night, he said only, "Tomorrow you will speak to 10 strangers. Ask each, what is the hardest thing you ever did? Write their answers. Nothing more." Vincent's stomach nodded. 10 strangers? He would rather face lions. Yet dawn found him in the marketplace, voice barely a whisper. The first 3 ignored him. The 4th snapped at him to leave her alone. By the 7th, sweat soaked his shirt. But the 8th, an old flower seller named Mary, smiled and told him how she had once carried her dying husband 20 miles for medicine. Something shifted inside Vincent. He listened. He wrote. By sunset, he had 10 stories weighing his pouch like treasures, and 2 of the strangers had invited him for tea the following week. The second morning, Sage Elias handed him a glass of water and pointed to a group of street children. "Teach them why this water is precious. 10 minutes. Begin." Vincent's heart pounded loud enough for the children to hear. He opened his mouth. Nothing came. Then he remembered Mary's story. Voice shaking, he began, "Water is life. It carries courage from one heart to another." The words stumbled, but they came. When he finished, the children clapped and begged for more. For the first time in his life, Vincent felt the sweet taste of being heard. On the 3rd day, Sage Elias's eyes turned grave. "Now return to your father, look him in the eye, and speak the truth of these 3 days." Terror flooded back, colder than the river. "He will beat me. He will curse me again." "Then you will die having tried nothing," the sage replied softly. "Or you will live having tried everything. Choose." Night had fallen when Vincent reached the shop. His father sat among empty shelves, head in hands. When he saw his son in the doorway, rage flared, then faltered at something new in Vincent's eyes. Vincent knelt. His voice, still soft, did not waver. "Father, I gave away our salt because I was afraid to speak. But these 3 days I spoke to strangers, taught children, and learned that fear is only a shadow. Give me one chance to prove the shadow can be chased away." Silence stretched, thick as fog. Then Henry did something he had never done. He placed a trembling hand on his son's head. "Start tomorrow," he whispered. Years passed like pages turning in the wind. The shy boy who once stood at the edge of the river became the merchant whose calm voice and honest eyes drew customers from distant cities. People no longer called him foolish, they called him wise. And on quiet evenings, when the lamps were lit, Vincent would walk to Sage Elias's cottage and leave a small sack of the finest salt at the door. Payment for the 3 days that turned a drifting boat into a ship with sails. Remember this. Whenever fear whispers that you are not enough, the world does not measure your worth. It only reflects the image you dare to show it. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else is more important than fear. Step forward, even with shaking knees. The river is wide, But every great journey begins with a single, trembling step onto the water. And sometimes, the water holds you up.